Anyways, I can talk about Triskele logistics all day long. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick on my team who's sitting at the back of the room, and I'm going to get Steve and Ryan and William to just give a little wave. That's the team for Triskele logistics. People missed it, so do it again.
There it is.
All right, we're a very small, thanks Brenda's, very small supply chain consulting firm. We specialize in cost reduction within supply chain, and one of the ways that we focus on cost reduction is through error elimination and making sure that you're efficient and effective at what you do, and you don't have to do redeliveries or rework a product or things like that. So I'm gonna what did you do to get this to move?
I'm pressing that arrow button.
Forward, down. I understand. Why does this is a theme in my life, isn't it, Linda? We had a report out for building inclusive workplaces, and just those two, don't touch anything else? Okay, I got it. Lots of people have heard of lean manufacturing. The thing for me that's really important about lean is that it's a philosophy and a culture, and it's about tools as well. So it's not just about value stream maps or Kaizen principles or things like that. It's really important that lean gets embedded in your culture and it becomes part of how you think. And so part of the reason why we can do what we do within Triskele Logistics is because lean is part of how we think and how we look at everything that we do. So lean philosophy is teamwork, Gemba, which is getting down right into the heart of the operations and actually watching what people are doing, having a huge amount of respect for your people, so listening to the people on the front line who are telling you this isn't working, or I'm fighting with so-and-so because they didn't give me this, or I didn't have this information when I needed it. So you really need to listen and respect the people that you're working with. And then continuous improvement means sometimes that you don't ever actually achieve an end state. And so you have to get used to the fact that you may have achieved huge progress, but there's always more. And so if you're not celebrating your successes along the way, that can feel like unfinished business. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a thing about checking off, I got this done. And so if you're not making sure you do that, it can really make you feel like you're not getting anywhere. So supply chain waste, there's 7 kinds of supply chain waste. There's overproduction, defects, inappropriate processing, transportation, all transportation, unnecessary inventory, unnecessary motion, and waiting. And within the supply chain, those of you who are boots on the ground, as I call it, supply chain, will tell you that every single one of those 7 types of waste happen every single day, about 4,000 times a day. So some common supply chain issues that you might see, or errors as I would call it, are Russian special deliveries, over shortage and damage claims because product was incorrectly shipped, shorted, or damaged on arrival, waiting time at the time of loading or unloading, shipment delays, and it goes on and on. There's weather delays, or there's incorrectly filled out paperwork, or other types of things that happen within the supply chain every day. I like to call the supply chain sector a nation of firefighters. We really like to put on our superhero cape and go out and save the day and say, hey, we solved all these problems. But I'm a proponent of let's fire prevent versus firefight. So those are just some of the 4, and I use them as an example. But the impacts of those errors are that you can have inefficient asset utilization, which increases your environmental impact. You can have poor supply chain performance as far as your on-time delivery goes. You have a decrease in reliability. Your customers may not trust that you're actually going to get done what you say you're going to get done. You have fines and penalties, particularly from some of the larger retailers. This is, I call it penalty-itis, if you're not there when you're supposed to be there. And even if sometimes you're there 15 minutes but you didn't check in exactly the right way, you're late, and so there's a penalty. So it's knowing some of those different details. increased cost, sometimes in the millions of dollars. So when you talk about various warehouses, I won't name names, but there are some large warehouses where you can wait 2.5 to 3 hours every single time you go to deliver there because they are not managing their dock properly. Every transportation service provider will charge you a minimum of $75 an hour to pay for that wait time because it's a cost from them. So you have to know when you're pricing that customer that chances are that you're going to have some increased wiggle room in there to make sure that you're profitable. You can also have a decrease in customer service from having those errors, decrease in employee job satisfaction. It's not necessarily fun to get yelled at all the time by customer service because something didn't get where it was supposed to go when it was supposed to go, and it's not always fun to get yelled at by your customer either because you haven't done what you said you were going to do. Cultural issues, sometimes if there's a lot of issues and a lot of interdepartmental handoffs. So my favorite thing in supply chain is the sales team who promises that we can get something there in 4 days when the transit time is 6. And then you end up trying to manage internally. The sales team promises the universe and the operations and supply chain team go, what did you do? Or even between trucking and warehousing in some cases, it can be a real challenge just getting all of those departments to understand upstream and downstream issues and making sure that everybody's aware of what needs to happen. Again, we are a nation of firefighters, I think, and fire preventers. We are moving forward into an area where there are more people looking at strategy, supply chain systems as a whole, but that's a relatively newer field within the supply chain industry. So this is the process that I've followed in my life throughout managing logistics at Canadian Pacific, as well as being Parmalat Canada's Western Canada distribution manager for a number of years. The first thing that I found with eliminating errors that were consistently occurring is that I had to create a common understanding of what the expectations were, and I found it helpful to assume that absolutely nobody knew what the process actually was. So if I assumed that everybody knew what the process was and I didn't clearly articulate it, chances were somebody would walk out of the room and not actually know what the new process was going to be. So the second thing was documenting and standardizing all of the processes, doing that with the entire team and all of the stakeholders, and looking beyond our own borders. So working with the sales team, working with operations, working with transportation warehousing, accounting, on route settlement, and customer service, so that everyone had a consistent understanding of the order gets placed at this time, we're expected to have it picked by this time, it needs to go out the door by this time, and it's going to arrive at the customer at this time. So that everybody understood their part in making sure that that delivery happened the way it was supposed to and when it was supposed to. Knowing what the root cause was. I think I make a comment later on about Murphy. And it's really, and I'm talking about Murphy's Law, it's really important to understand what the actual root cause of the issue was that you're dealing with. So for example, it used to happen where we would get a phone call and say, well, this customer didn't get their product, you didn't deliver it. And then we would look into it and realize, oh, well, it actually got shipped to another customer by accident, but how come that happened? Oh, it was because the paperwork for that customer got attached to the wrong pallet by the warehouse, and so it got loaded on the wrong truck. So as much as you might think, oh, that driver made a mistake at the time of delivery, you need to follow through all the way back and identify every single issue that happened along the way, because it's quite often not just one thing, it's quite often many things that end up with an issue at time of delivery. You need to continuously change or add the existing process to fix the error. So you'll start with a baseline process and think that, okay, this is going to work, we've got it nailed, and then something will happen or somebody won't understand something because it's not communicated clearly enough for them, and so you need to work with everybody to continuously enhance the process. It's not a just build a process, walk away and you're done. It ends up being an iterative process where you're continuously coming back and working on how you fix the error. The other thing is creating accountability and visibility. People don't like change. It's actually hard on our brain. I don't know if any of you have read Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, but he talks a lot about what goes on in your brain when you're trying to change. And change is actually an uncomfortable physical state for all of us. And so in order for you to get people to change and to do things differently, you have to create accountability and visibility to what's going on in a very neutral way, and in a way that's not disrespectful or demeaning to the people who are actually trying to do the very best they can every time they come to work. So I'm a big proponent on standardizing processes, create standard operating procedures, but also include what do you do when things go wrong. So there's 7 different types of issues that can happen when you're transporting product. There's motor vehicle accidents, there's weather-related delays, there's an issue where a trailer may have a breakdown or whatever. There's a whole bunch of different things that can happen. Know what you're going to do when they do, because they are going to happen. So if you decide that everything's going to be perfect and you only need a standard operating procedure for when things are awesome, you'll miss the opportunity when things aren't to fix it. Create an end-to-end value stream map. A value stream map highlights what in your supply chain a customer would be willing to pay for. So they wouldn't necessarily be willing to pay for interdepartmental conflict. They might be interested in paying for the product. They're not going to necessarily want to pay for various aspects of your process. And so it's really important to do a value stream map that highlights the value within that process, and make sure that everybody within this key stakeholder groups that we talked about understands what your processes are and how well they're working, all the way from order management to invoice management to transportation. And then review those value stream maps with all your stakeholders, and review them more than once. It takes us 7 different ways of communication to actually understand what's being communicated to. So repetition is actually really, really important. I talked a little bit earlier about investigating the root cause, knowing what your standard issue problem resolution processes are. And then in Lean, we don't believe in creating big, huge data metrics on all the issues. A whiteboard and a pen will do. And as long as that whiteboard and the pen is near whoever it is that needs to capture the information, you can be as simple as writing the number of issues that you've had from a warehouse picking on the shop floor or on the warehouse floor, making it visible to people and tracking what that number is every single day. It creates awareness, and it ends up getting people to really think about what they're doing and how they're doing it. We did this at Canadian Pacific Railway on the shop floor in mechanical services, and the results were shocking. It created so much visibility to what people were doing and how they were doing it, and people were talking about how they could do things differently and why were they having all these issues, and it increased communication and then fluidity within the CP network significantly. Review your invoices from your service providers. I almost fell over laughing. I had a very large transportation carrier. I asked them for their accessorial sheets, which is wait time, redelivery fees, lumping, swamping, tailgate charges, a bunch of different things. And they sent me their value-added services charges. And for me, it was the first time I'd ever seen somebody say that the accessorial fees related to servicing the business in that manner. They're right. A lot of the times the trucking industry or the warehouses are not the ones causing the issue. So they are value-added service charges. But the reason I say watch them is because you'll quite often have a planned rate, and your planned rate is based on awesomeness and when everything is going really, really well. And your invoice will tell you what's really going on. It'll tell you how well things are going. It'll tell you how much wait time you have built in, how many times did you redeliver something. And so invoices are the lowest level of detail and provide a huge amount of information to what's actually going on in your supply chain. And then again, investigating the root cause of the issue, and don't stop until you have the real answer. And one of the best ways that I learned to do this was to get the whole entire team on the phone. So everyone in sales, operations, they used to hate me. I used to say, hey guys, we need 15 minutes. We got to talk about this collectively, because I call it the coat of arms. where they would say, no, it's this person, or no, it's that person. And the only way to stop that is to get everybody on the phone and actually talk about what really happened. And it also takes a little bit of the emotion out of it if you're focusing on a process rather than what didn't go right today. So I was talking about this, creating accountability. Every time you get everybody in the room together, it changes the dynamic. You can't point fingers at people because they're sitting there right in front of you, and you can't be rude about them or to them, unless you really are that rude, but usually it changes the dynamic in the room, and it changes how people communicate with each other. And then I follow a 3-strike rule in every single process implementation I do. You forgot? Okay. Let me remind you, this is the new process. You must have a signature on a proof of delivery at the time of delivery because anything else is unacceptable. The process isn't clear? Okay, I'll give you that. Maybe it's not clear. What's wrong? What's not working with it? What do we need to change? Why do we need to change it? And then you change the process, and then you retrain everybody. So again, you're going back to that same cohort of people and you're talking about what changed, why did it change, how come it's important, and then you move forward. And consequences. Consequences for not having proof of delivery in my world meant a $25 administration fee every time we found one, fines, performance rules, and different ways of creating accountability and making sure that people were paying attention to what they were doing. Because you might not think it's a big deal to have a signature on a proof of delivery, but if you just delivered a multiple $1,000 pallet of product and there's no signature and someone says I didn't get it, you're now dead in the water and you have an overage shortage and damage claim of X many thousands of dollars, and those can add up and cost you a significant amount of money. So why is it important to eliminate your errors? What's so sustainable about it? Yes, it's a cost thing. Yes, it's a collaboration thing. But when you look at people and what reducing your errors does for your people, it increases your communication. It gives you higher job satisfaction because as much as we are a nation of firefighters and supply chain, and some of it's by the nature of the many millions of moving parts that you're managing, it doesn't necessarily feel good to get told that you're not doing things correctly every single day. So people get a little bit dissatisfied with what they're doing if we're always making mistakes. There's a faster response time when there is an issue if you have standardized processes and everyone knows what's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen, instead of spending a whole bunch of time running around trying to figure out what's going on. If you have a standard process, you can deal with the investigation part afterwards and respond to your customers much more quickly. It creates better cross-functional department communication, allows you to actually open up dialogue and have everyone understand the upstream, middle stream, and downstream processes within the supply chain so that you can actually improve your overall service levels. And fire prevention, again, like I talked about earlier. The financial benefits, you can increase your asset utilization, you have less inventory damage and shrink and loss. You can decrease your time to manage operations. You'll have reduced costs for your accessorial and value-added service charges. You can have higher reliability and customer satisfaction and better brand loyalty because you're reliable. You say what you're going to do, and then you are able to execute it when you have an error or low error supply chain. On the environmental side of things, you use fewer resources in water, raw material, and other things. So if you have a rush or a special delivery, chances are, unless you have a really, really big network, you are sending that truck out with only a couple of pallets potentially, rather than a full truckload. And so if you can reduce that error in the first place, you don't have to send that rush and special delivery out, and that way you can eliminate the number of trucks that are actually on the road using resources. You can also eliminate, if you have damaged products at time of delivery, if you think about what went into making those products, so the packaging, the processing cost, the actual raw material that went into it, and now you're actually redelivering the exact same product, but it's a second shipment, it's very, very costly. It will reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, hopefully, for the reasons I mentioned before. You should have fewer shipments or shipments that are more optimized. You reduce your consumption, reduce your packaging and your waste, and you can reduce the amount of paper, because even if you have a Russian special delivery, you're sending that out on a second bill of lading, on a second pick ticket, on a second whatever, and now you've doubled your paper usage and other ink supplies and things like that as well. From a cultural perspective, focusing on a process is a lot less emotional than focusing on who didn't do what properly. Tracking issues, even on the whiteboard, creates data and facts, not perceptions, and it gives you hard information that says this is not working or this is working really, really well. And keeping in mind that lean is always about, just because it's working really well doesn't mean that you're gonna not look at it. It might mean that you go from 95 to 98% rather than staying at 95. The cross-functional approach within your culture it improves your corporate functioning. It allows your team, instead of spending time having internal debates about what needs to be done, to focus on what they need to do, which is the improvement of your overall organization. It does foster collaboration and teamwork. There's nothing like creating a team out of conflict and having team gel together because you solved a really big problem and you've been able to actually improve something collectively together. And it fosters solution-based thinking. So instead of doing what I've always done or accepting that this is how it is, that when you deliver to this particular warehouse, they are always 2.5 hours late, and some of you in the room could have some ideas about who those people are. But it fosters solution-based thinking. So if you don't accept the status quo, then you can actually work with those organizations to understand what it is that's happening on their side that's causing them to be late every single time you go to deliver to their warehouse. In summary, you want to try and create systems that get it right the first time. You want to gather data and then stick to the facts. There's nothing worse than getting told that you were the problem and then finding out that it was actually somebody else and you've just been lambasted for the last whatever time by the customer to realize that it actually was an issue that was upstream or downstream of you that you couldn't control. Focus on fixing one issue at a time. If you try and fix too many things all at once, it's too much change and then processes break down, people get overloaded, and it's easier if you fix on making one critical change at a time. And then continue to improve and build on your starting point. I've said that a couple of times. The major philosophy of lean and the thing that's important to me is you get started. It might not be perfect. You hone it as you go, and you continuously focus on making the changes that you need to make in order to improve. And it's okay if there's no destination, because in continuous improvement it means in life and in business and everything else you're always continuously learning, you're always continuously improving, but you need to stop and celebrate your progress along the way so that everybody feels like they're actually getting somewhere. And you can ignore my questions. That's it.